The air, thick with the scent of pine and fear, vibrated with a low, guttural chant. Shadows stretched long and distorted under the baleful glow of a near-full moon, casting the figures gathered around the ancient stone of lament in grotesque relief. Tonight, a life was to be offered. Not in sacrifice to a vengeful god, but as a desperate plea from a dying pack to a silent moon. Ilara knelt, her small frame barely visible amidst the hulking shapes of her packmates, her head bowed in quiet acceptance. The rough bark of the ceremonial oak dug into her skin, a familiar discomfort. Her wrists, bound with thick hemp ropes, felt numb. The chilling wind whipped strands of her dark hair across her face, carrying with it the reek of despair and the pungent, unmistakable aroma of the Alpha's rage. Alpha Theron stood before the stone, his massive wolf form rippling with barely contained fury, his eyes, like molten gold, fixed on her. He pointed a clawed finger, not quite touching her, but the unspoken accusation hung heavy in the frigid night. She is the blight. His voice, deep and resonant even in human form, boomed, echoing through the clearing. The very manifestation of our weakness, an omega, barren and frail, a mockery of our lineage. Our ancestors cry out for an end to this shame. A chorus of low growls, some hesitant, some eager, rippled through the assembled Silverwood pack. Ilara felt their judgment like physical blows. They had always looked upon her with a mixture of pity and contempt, ever since her birth. She was small, without the formidable scent of an alpha, the nurturing warmth of a Luna, or the robust energy of a beta. She was just Ilara, an omega, an afterthought, a vessel of sorrow. Her supposed feebleness, her quiet nature, her lack of a strong wolf manifestation had been twisted into the reason for their pack's current suffering. The sickness that withered their pups, the dwindling prey, the encroaching darkness from the shadowfen, it was all laid at her feet. She closed her eyes, not in prayer, but in a desperate attempt to gather her scattered courage. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This is it, she thought, a desolate whisper in the vast cavern of her mind. This is how it ends. The blade, sharp and ancient, usually reserved for the hunt, now gleamed menacingly in Alpha Theron's hand, reflecting the moon's stark light. He raised it, a glint of triumph in his eyes, a grim satisfaction in his rigid posture. The air grew still, heavy with anticipation. The chanting crescendoed, a desperate, mournful dirge. Just as the blade began its descent, a low, ominous rumble shook the very earth beneath them. The ancient oaks groaned, their branches swaying violently as if in protest. A guttural roar, far deeper and more primal than any wolf's, ripped through the silence, silencing the chanting, freezing Alpha Theron in mid-strike. A fissure, black and jagged, tore through the ground directly beneath the stone of lament, splitting it in two with an ear-splitting crack. The ancient stone tottered, then crashed inwards, dragging Alpha Theron with it into the sudden chasm. Chaos erupted. Screams of terror mingled with the roar of splintering timber and crumbling earth. Ilara, still bound, was thrown violently to the side as the ground convulsed. She saw glimpses of terrified faces, heard the frantic howls of wolves scattering into the darkness. But before she could even process the sudden reprieve, before she could truly understand what had just transpired, the very earth where the stone had stood, where Alpha Theron had fallen, erupted in a blinding flash of silver light, momentarily stealing her vision. When the light faded, a profound silence descended, broken only by the whimpering of frightened pups and the distant, confused cries of the fleeing pack. Theron was gone. The stone was gone. Only a smoking, jagged crater remained. Ilara lay amidst the debris, her ropes miraculously frayed and broken by the seismic shift, her body aching, her mind reeling. The moon, now fully emerged from behind the clouds, cast its ethereal glow upon her, a silent witness to the impossible. What had just happened? Was this a sign of the moon goddess's wrath or her salvation? She pushed herself up, her limbs trembling, gazing at the empty crater, a new, unsettling chill creeping into her bones. The path ahead was unknown, shrouded in mystery and danger, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same. The fragile thread of her life, poised to be severed, had instead been violently rerouted, plunging her into a destiny she could not yet comprehend. Every soul, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, carries a universe within. It is not the loudness of its song, but the truth of its melody that echoes through eternity. The moon pool, nestled deep within the whispering heart of the silverwood, shimmered under the faint blush of dawn. Mist, like forgotten spirits, danced across its surface, obscuring and then revealing the ancient, moss-covered stones that lined its banks. Ilara sat beside it, her fingers tracing the smooth, cool surface of a worry stone she always kept close. Its polished gray surface offered a small measure of comfort, a silent anchor in a life often adrift. She had come here, as she did most mornings, seeking solace, seeking a whisper of clarity in the chaotic aftermath of the previous night's cataclysm. She was Ilara, a name that once meant sunray in the ancient tongue, a cruel irony given the perpetual shadow that seemed to cling to her existence. In the Silverwood Pack, she was simply the Omega. Not an Omega, but the Omega, a title imbued with layers of meaning, none of them flattering. It was a brand, a designation of her weakness, her perceived inability to contribute in any meaningful way to the pack's survival or prosperity. She was 20 summers old, yet felt a weariness that belied her youth, a burden of unspoken sorrow and unheard wisdom. Her skin was pale, a stark contrast to the rich, earthy tones of her packmates, and her eyes, the color of twilight, held a depth that few bothered to notice. Her frame was slender, not fragile, but certainly not built for the raw power expected of a wolf shifter. She was often relegated to the most menial of tasks, foraging for the bitterest roots, tending to the weakest pups, cleaning the communal dens. Tasks that kept her out of sight, out of mind, yet paradoxically, tasks that allowed her a unique perspective on the pack's struggles. She saw the sick pups up close, observed the subtle signs of illness that stronger wolves missed, learned which herbs offered the slightest comfort. She understood the pack's pain intimately, feeling it resonate in her own quiet heart, a silent echo of their suffering. The conflict that defined her life was stark: her inherent empathy and connection to the pack's true needs versus the pack's unyielding expectation of physical prowess and dominance. Their current alpha, or rather their former alpha, Farron, had embodied this rigid worldview. He had valued strength above all else, seeing any deviation as weakness, a flaw to be purged. And Ilara, in his eyes, was the ultimate flaw. The Silverwood Pack was ailing. A creeping sickness, dubbed the Moon's Shadow, had claimed countless pups and elders, leaving behind a pervasive scent of fear and despair. The hunting grounds grew sparse, whether from natural shifts or an encroaching, unseen force, no one could truly say. Borders were threatened by the more aggressive Shadowfen Pack to the west, led by an alpha of formidable reputation. And within the Silverwood itself, discord festered, a silent poison. The old ways, the traditions of balance and unity, were crumbling under Theron's increasingly desperate and brutal rule. Ilara felt it all, a constant ache in her spirit. She saw the fear in the eyes of the mothers, the frustration of the hunters, the hopelessness etched on the faces of the elders. She longed to help, to offer the small bits of knowledge she'd gleaned, the quiet wisdom she'd cultivated in her solitary observations. But her voice, when she dared to raise it, was invariably dismissed, often with a scoff, sometimes with a harsh word, always with the underlying message that an Omega had no place in matters of importance. The memory of the previous night, the blade, the earth's fury, swirled around her, an unsettling dream made terrifyingly real. Theron was gone, vanished. The stone of lament, an ancient focal point of their pack, was shattered. Who would lead them now? Who would guide them through this new, terrifying uncertainty? The unspoken answer hung in the air. Anyone but her. A rustle in the undergrowth broke her reverie. Alara tensed, her senses, usually heightened, now frayed by exhaustion. A large gray wolf emerged from the tree line, its fur the color of storm clouds, its eyes a piercing silver. It was Alpha Kale, leader of the Shadowfen pack. Kale was everything Ilara was not, at least on the surface. He was a force of nature, his wolf form immense and powerful, his human form equally imposing. Broad-shouldered, with eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of the ancient forest, and a jawline that spoke of unyielding resolve. His scent, even from a distance, was one of command and raw strength, laced with the subtle, clean scent of rain on pine. He exuded an aura of quiet authority, a stark contrast to Theron's blustering rage. He moved with a predator's grace, each step deliberate, grounded. He had been observed on the Silverwood borders more frequently of late, a silent sentinel, his presence a source of anxiety for Ilara's pack. He was a legend, a warrior who had unified the disparate clans of the Shadowfen, building them into a formidable force. His reasons for venturing into Silverwood territory now, with Theron's disappearance, were unclear, but Ilara felt a tremor of apprehension. Was he here to conquer? To claim the vulnerable Silverwood for his own? Kale stopped several paces from the moon pool, his gaze sweeping over the serene water, then landing on Ilara. His silver eyes, intense and assessing, held no malice, but neither did they hold warmth. Only a calm, analytical scrutiny. He did not growl, did not bare his teeth, yet his presence was a palpable weight, a silent challenge. Ilara felt her Omega scent, already subdued, recede even further, trying to disappear, to become invisible. He shifted, the transformation swift and fluid, his powerful wolf form melting into that of a man. He wore simple leather tunics and breeches, practical and unadorned. His voice, when he spoke, was a low rumble, surprisingly calm. The Silverwood pack is adrift. It was not a question, but a statement of undeniable fact. His eyes lingered on her, not with contempt, but with an unsettling curiosity. I heard the earth's roar last night, and saw the light. Ilara swallowed, her throat dry. Alpha Theron, he fell, into the chasm, the stone, it was destroyed. She spoke softly, her voice barely above a whisper, hesitant as was her way. Kale's gaze sharpened, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. A strange omen, Omega. Were you involved? The question was laced with an underlying current, not of accusation, but of probing inquiry. He didn't dismiss her outright, didn't mock her. He simply asked. This was a novelty. I was there, Ilara admitted, her gaze dropping to the rippling surface of the moon pool. I was to be sacrificed for the pack's ills. The shame of it still burned. A low sound, almost a growl, escaped Kale, not of anger, but perhaps of disbelief. Sacrificed for a pack's failings? Theron's judgment was truly clouded. He paused, then continued, his voice a little softer, though still resolute. The Shadowfen does not war with the weak, but neither do we tolerate a vacuum of power. What will become of the Silverwood, little Omega? Little Omega. The familiar sting of the title, even from him, still pricked. But there was something different in his tone, a detached observation rather than an insult. Ilara lifted her gaze, meeting his silver eyes, surprised to find a glimmer of something akin to patience there. "I do not know, Alpha KL. No one knows." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then turned and began to walk away, his retreat as silent and graceful as his arrival. He shifted back into his wolf form, a magnificent creature of strength and raw power, and disappeared into the shadows of the ancient trees. Ilara watched him go, a strange sense of unease settling over her. He had come, observed, and left, leaving behind more questions than answers. The world was shifting, and she, the feeble Omega, was caught in its turbulent currents, a solitary leaf clinging to a branch in a brewing storm. The moon pool reflected her uncertainty, its surface still and dark, holding secrets she could not yet decipher. The weeks that followed Theron's disappearance were a whirlwind of confusion and increasing desperation for the Silverwood pack. With no clear successor, the pack fractured. The betas, traditionally strong, were either too indecisive or too power-hungry to unite the remaining wolves. Food dwindled further. The moon shadow sickness tightened its grip, taking more pups, more elders, leaving their mothers' howls of grief to echo through the forest at night. Ilara found herself in an even more precarious position. The immediate danger of sacrifice had passed, but her existence was still a burden, a reminder of their shame. Yet, in the absence of Theron's tyranny, a subtle shift occurred. The betas were too consumed by their own squabbles to enforce the old rules with the same ferocity. This gave Ilara a sliver of freedom, a small space to operate within. She continued her solitary work, tending to the sick, foraging for the scarce healing herbs, her knowledge of the forest floor expanding with each desperate search. One cold afternoon, she discovered a small patch of moon petal, a rare flower known for its potent fever-reducing properties, growing precariously close to the edge of the forbidden Shadowfin territory. It was a risky venture, but the newest litter of pups was afflicted, their breathing shallow, their tiny bodies burning with fever. Their mother, Lyra, a young beta, usually stoic, looked upon her children with raw, helpless fear. Ilara couldn't ignore it. She ventured close to the border, her heart pounding, the scent of Shadowfin wolves a constant, unnerving presence. She harvested the delicate flowers quickly, her fingers nimble, but as she turned to leave, a deep growl erupted from the trees. Alpha KL emerged, not in wolf form, but in his powerful human shape, his expression grim. His silver eyes narrowed, sweeping from her small basket of moon petal to her anxious face. "You trespass, little Omega, and you steal our herbs." His voice was low, dangerous. Ilara felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks, partly from fear, partly from indignation. "I steal nothing, Alpha Kale. These grow on the border, not solely within your lands. And they are for the sick pups of my pack. They are dying." Her voice, though soft, held an unexpected firmness, fueled by desperation for the little ones. Kale's gaze softened almost imperceptibly as she spoke of the pups. The reports of the Silverwood's decline had reached him, of course. He knew of the sickness. He stepped closer, his scent, powerful and grounding, enveloping her. "You risk much for your pack, for those who cast you aside." "They are my pack," Ilara stated simply, looking up at him, her eyes clear and unwavering. "Sick or healthy, they are still my family." A long moment passed, filled only by the rustling of leaves and the distant call of a raven. Kale's expression became thoughtful. Then, to Ilara's surprise, he reached into a pouch at his belt and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden amulet. "The moon petal is potent, but only if prepared correctly. Its strength is fleeting. This amulet," he held it out, "contains a drop of moonfall dew, collected only at the first full moon of winter. It will preserve the herb's potency, amplify its healing properties." Ilara stared at the amulet, then at Kale, utterly bewildered. He, the formidable alpha of the Shadowfin, was not only not punishing her, but was offering aid? It was unheard of. "Why?" she asked, her voice a hesitant whisper. Kale's gaze held hers, a flicker of something ancient and knowing in his silver eyes. "A true leader does not revel in a rival's suffering, Omega. He understands that a sickness, unchecked, can spread beyond borders. And a true healer spirit, even one unrecognized, is a rare and precious thing." He placed the amulet in her hand. It was warm, humming with a faint, almost imperceptible energy. "Return to your pack. Help your pups. But know this, the Silverwood grows weaker by the day, and the Shadowfin watches." He turned and melted back into the shadows, leaving Ilara clutching the amulet, the scent of him lingering in the air, a complex mix of power, concern, and something else she couldn't quite name. She rushed back to her den, following his instructions, crushing the moon petal with the moonfall dew. She administered the paste to the feverish pups, and by morning their fevers had broken. Lyra, the pup's mother, looked at Ilara with a profound gratitude that she hadn't received in years. A small seed of hope, fragile but persistent, began to sprout in Ilara's heart. This shared moment, this unexpected act of kindness from Kale, marked a turning point. It was the first instance where her quiet efforts had been acknowledged, not just by a grateful mother, but by a powerful outsider. It was the beginning of a subtle shift, a crack in the wall of indifference that had surrounded her. She had been mocked as the feeble Omega, yet her feeble hands had just saved lives, not with brute strength, but with a different kind of wisdom, a different kind of strength, one that Kyle, of all people, seemed to recognize. The passage of the hook, the desperate plea, the descent of the blade, was thwarted not by chance alone, but by a chain of events set in motion long before, by the very qualities Alpha Theron sought to eradicate from her. The moon had not accepted their sacrifice, it had rejected it, not because Ilara was a blight, but because she was a nascent hope. The earth's roar, the sudden fissure, the blinding light, these were not random acts of nature, but the world itself reacting to a desecration, protecting a spirit it recognized as vital. Theron's downfall had paved the way for something new, something that Ilara, in her quiet strength, was unknowingly destined to embody. Days turned into weeks. Ilara continued her work, now with a quiet confidence. More wolves, witnessing the healing of Lyra's pups, cautiously sought her out for remedies, for advice. It was always in hushed tones, away from the prying eyes of the feuding betas, but it was a start. She became a silent repository of the pack's ailments, a confidant for their fears. She listened, truly listened, to their laments, their hopes, their small joys. She saw the pack not as a hierarchy of strength, but as a complex tapestry of interconnected lives, each thread vital. Kyle, too, became a more frequent, though still distant presence. He would appear at the border, sometimes in wolf form, sometimes human, observing, always observing. Sometimes he would leave small bundles of herbs, or an offering of particularly potent hunter's balm, just on the edge of Silverwood territory, knowing Ilara would find them. Their exchanges were brief, often silent, filled with unspoken understanding. He didn't offer lavish praise, but his silent acknowledgement, his genuine respect for her quiet healing, spoke volumes. One evening, as Ilara collected water from a stream, Kyle emerged from the woods, his face etched with worry. "The Shadowfin scouts report a new kind of blight, Omega. It affects the elder trees, twisting their branches, draining their life force. It spreads rapidly, silencing the forest itself. Our shamans are baffled." Ilara felt a chill, not from the cold, but from the words. The forest was their lifeblood. "The moon's shadow sickness among our pups, it shares similarities, a slow drain, a twisting of life force." She walked to a nearby elder oak, its leaves already showing the telltale grayish tinge, its bark brittle. Her fingers, sensitive to the subtle energies of the forest, felt a cold, alien presence beneath the surface. It is not natural. It feels forced. Kayel's eyes met hers, a flash of surprise in their depths. Forced? What do you mean? A sickness born of malevolence, Ilara explained, her voice gaining strength, drawing on her deep, intuitive connection to the land. A dark magic, perhaps, something that seeks to unravel the very essence of life. She closed her eyes, placing her palms against the tree's gnarled bark, listening. Her mind, usually quiet and introspective, suddenly flooded with images, twisted runes, a dark pool, a low, guttural chant, a familiar scent, the metallic tang of old blood. It was vague, unsettling. Kayal watched her, a silent intensity in his gaze. He saw not the feeble Omega, but a woman communing with the ancient spirits of the forest, a conduit to something profound. "You have a gift, Ilara," he said, his voice low, almost reverent, "a connection to the land, to the deeper currents of magic that few possess." "It is simply listening," she demurred, opening her eyes, feeling a blush creep up her neck at his words. No one had ever spoken to her like that. "Then listen well," Kayal urged, his voice grave. "For this blight, if it consumes the forests, will consume us all. Our packs, your silverwood, my shadowfen, will crumble. We must find its source. Together." The word "together" hung in the air, a powerful, unifying sound. It was the first time an alpha had ever suggested such a thing to her, let alone Kayal, the formidable leader of their rival pack. It was a merging of destinies, a recognition of her worth that transcended rank and history. And in that moment, under the vast, indifferent sky, a fragile alliance was forged between the powerful alpha of the Shadowfen and the ridiculed Omega of the Silverwood. Their shared purpose, the looming threat, began to weave their fates together, subtly but inexorably. The alliance, born of desperate necessity, deepened with each passing day. Ilara and Kayal met often, their rendezvous clandestine, far from the suspicious eyes of the remaining Silverwood betas who still clung to the old animosities. Their partnership was a strange dance of contrasts. Kayal, the towering alpha, radiating power and strategic brilliance. Ilara, the quiet Omega, offering subtle insights and an almost preternatural intuition. Their shared task was daunting. The blight was indeed unnatural, a creeping malevolence that felt less like disease and more like a curse. It manifested not just in the dying trees and sick pups, but in the very atmosphere of the forest. A pervasive chill, a stifling quiet where birdsong used to be, a subtle distortion of the familiar. Ilara's unique gift for listening became their most potent weapon. She would walk through the blighted areas, her hand against the dying bark of trees, her eyes closed, her mind open. She described what she felt, a cold void, a parasitic drain, a discordant hum beneath the earth. She traced patterns, not visible to the eye, but palpable to her senses. "It follows the old ley lines," she murmured one afternoon, pointing to a faint, ancient path worn by generations of wolf. Pause. "It feeds where the earth's energy is strongest, where our ancestors once sought solace and power." Kale, ever the pragmatic leader, initially struggled with Ilara's more ethereal approach. He was accustomed to tracking, to physical combat, to visible threats. But he saw the results. Her insights led them to specific areas of the blight's origin, places where the malevolence felt most concentrated. He watched her, a fascination growing in his silver eyes. She wasn't weak. She was strong in ways he hadn't understood possible. Her strength was not in brute force, but in resilience, in perception, in an unwavering kindness that somehow made her untouchable. Their conversation stretched late into the nights, under the watchful gaze of the moon. They spoke of the blight, of the struggling packs, but also of their individual burdens. Kale spoke of the heavy mantle of leadership, the endless decisions, the weight of his pack's survival on his shoulders. Ilara, in turn, hesitantly revealed the depth of her loneliness, the sting of being perpetually undervalued, the quiet agony of seeing her pack suffer while her voice was ignored. "They called me Feeble," she confessed one night, her voice barely a whisper, as they sat by a hidden spring, the water's gentle murmur a soothing counterpoint to their revelations. A blight, a burden. Even when I tried to help, they saw only my designation, not my intent. Kale reached out, his large hand pausing just inches from hers, a silent offer of comfort. He refrained from physical touch, respecting the unspoken boundaries, but the gesture itself was a balm. "They were blind," he stated, his voice firm, unwavering, "and short-sighted. True strength is not always measured in muscle or rank. It is in the spirit, Ilara, in the will to endure, to protect, to heal. That you possess in abundance." His words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within her, a melody she had yearned to hear her entire life. A quiet flush spread across her cheeks, a warmth blooming in her chest that had nothing to do with the night's chill. It was the warmth of being seen, truly seen, for the first time. The slow-burn romance between them was built on these moments of shared vulnerability, shared purpose, and a growing, profound respect. It wasn't about physical attraction, not initially. It was about mutual understanding, about seeing the true spirit beneath the surface, about two souls burdened by responsibility and loneliness, finding solace and strength in each other. His scent, once a powerful marker of arrival, now felt like a comforting embrace, a safe harbor in the storm. Her quiet presence, once easily overlooked, now felt essential to him, a grounding force, a source of unexpected wisdom. Their investigations led them to an unsettling discovery. The blight was centered not within their territories, but beneath the abandoned ruins of the old weaver's den, a place long avoided by both packs due to ancient, unsettling legends. It was said to be cursed, a place where the veil between worlds thinned. One crisp autumn morning, as they prepared to venture into the ruins, a new shadow fell upon the Silverwood. Theron returned, not as the living alpha, but as something else. His eyes, once golden, now glowed with an eerie, unnatural green light. His fur, once sleek, was matted and bore the telltale signs of the very blight they were fighting, a sickly gray sheen, brittle and dead. He moved with a jerky, unnatural grace, an empty shell, animated by the dark magic of the blight. He was a puppet, a vessel, controlled by the very darkness he had once sought to banish through Ilara's sacrifice. He appeared in the main den, his presence immediately silencing the squabbling betas. Fear, primal and chilling, spread through the pack. "The Omega still lives?" Theron's voice, though his, was distorted, layered with a guttural, inhuman resonance. "The blight cannot thrive while her light lingers. She must be extinguished, now." He pointed a gnarled, blighted claw at Ilara, who stood by Kael's side. The pack, terrified by his spectral return, by the undeniable proof of dark magic, recoiled. The betas, seeing their chance to regain control, echoed his demand. "The alpha has returned. His will must be done." One of them, a brutish beta named Garth, howled. "The Omega is the cause of all our woes." Kael stepped forward, placing himself protectively in front of Ilara. "He is not your alpha. He is a husk, animated by the very darkness that threatens us all." His voice was a thunderclap, challenging the fear and superstition. "And Ilara is not a blight. She is our only hope." But the pack, caught between the terrifying image of their returned alpha and Kyle unfamiliar leadership, wavered. Theron raised his hands, and tendrils of dark, sickly energy, like grasping shadows, began to snake out from him, reaching for Ilara. This was the turning point. The pack stood frozen in terror, unable to act, unable to comprehend. It was a choice between the familiar, albeit terrifying past, and the unknown, hopeful future. Ilara knew she could not hide behind Kyle. This was her battle to fight, her pack to awaken. She stepped out from behind him, her small frame radiating a quiet but undeniable resolve. The dark tendrils lunged, but instead of fear, Ilara felt a surge of ancient energy, an awakening. She had been mocked as the feeble Omega, yet now, facing down the very manifestation of that mockery, she felt a core of strength she never knew she possessed. Her connection to the moon, to the earth, to the life force she had nurtured in secret, began to hum within her, a silent song of defiance. This time, the blade would not fall. This time, she would not be the sacrifice. She would be the shield. The air crackled with a malevolent energy, thick and suffocating. Theron, or rather, the dark entity animating his husk, snarled, the sound a discordant symphony. Of human rage and primal shadow. The tendrils of blight energy reaching for Ilara intensified, their tips glowing with an eerie, sickly green. The Silverwood pack, paralyzed by fear and confusion, watched, torn between their instinct to flee and a strange, nascent curiosity to see what the feeble Omega would do. Garth, the power-hungry beta, tried to rally some of the younger, more impressionable wolves, whispering about old prophecies and appeasing the returned alpha. Ilara, however, stood her ground. Kyle remained close, a silent, powerful presence, his hand resting on the hilt of his hunting knife, ready to intervene, but understanding, with an alpha's intuition, that this was Ilara's moment. He saw the shift in her, the quiet fire in her twilight eyes. "You are not Alpha Theron," Ilara's voice rang out, surprisingly clear and strong, cutting through the heavy air. "You are a shadow, a parasite feeding on a broken vessel, on a broken pack's fear." She lifted her hands, not in aggression, but in a gesture of profound connection to the earth beneath her feet. Her body hummed with a nascent energy, a luminous silver light, faint at first, then growing, began to emanate from her, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. It wasn't the raw power of an alpha shift, but something far older, far deeper. It was the pure, untamed essence of life itself, flowing through her. The blight tendrils recoiled with a hiss, as if burned by her light. The creature inhabiting Theron's body roared in fury, a sound that vibrated with ancient malevolence. "The Omega interferes! She weakens the hold! Strike her down!" it shrieked, its voice distorting further. But Ilara was no longer merely Ilara, the mocked Omega. She was a conduit. Her connection to the moon pool, to the ancient trees, to the spirits of the forest she had so diligently observed and nurtured, flared into brilliant existence. She closed her eyes for a moment, drawing upon the strength of the land, upon the collective memory of her ancestors. When she opened them, they glowed with a soft, ethereal light, mirroring the silver moon above. "The blight feeds on fear and division," Ilara proclaimed, her voice now resonant, echoing with a wisdom far beyond her years. "It feeds on the pain of rejection, the sorrow of loneliness, the anger of injustice." Theron's spirit, warped by his own bitterness, was fertile ground for its seeds. She extended her hands, not towards the creature. "But we are wolves of the forest. We are bound by more than blood. We are bound by shared stories, shared breath, shared destiny. We are not weak. We are resilient." As she spoke, the silver light around her intensified, radiating outwards in gentle waves. The fear in the pack members' eyes began to recede, replaced by wonder, by a flicker of hope. Lyra, the mother of the pups Ilara had saved, took a tentative step forward, her gaze fixed on Ilara. Others followed, their movements hesitant, but determined. Even Garth, his face a mask of confusion, found his will to obey the returned alpha wavering under the sheer force of Ilara's presence. The blight creature, sensing its hold weakening, lunged. It shed the last vestiges of Theron's human form, transforming into a monstrous, blighted wolf, its fur a festering gray, its eyes glowing with pure, destructive malice. It was no longer Theron, but the true entity, a creature of pure shadow and corruption. "No more!" Cale roared, finally joining the fray, shifting into his massive wolf form, his own powerful silver fur bristling, his eyes burning with protective fire. He met the creature's charge head-on, a blur of gray and silver. Their collision shook the earth, a clash of primal forces. But Ilara knew brute strength alone would not defeat this ancient darkness. It was not a physical foe in the traditional sense. It fed on despair. She raised her voice, not in a battle cry, but in a song, an ancient, almost forgotten melody of the moon goddess, a lullaby whispered by generations of healers. Her voice, once soft and unnoticed, now wove a tapestry of light and hope, intertwining with Cale's fierce growls and the creature's shrieks. As she sang, the silver light intensified, pulsing from her, not aggressively, but gently, like a living balm. It touched the blighted trees, and a faint green shimmer appeared on their withered leaves. It touched the pack members, and their lingering fear seemed to melt away, replaced by a surge of courage. The monster, however, shrieked, its form flickering, destabilizing, unable to bear the pure, resonant sound of life and hope. The Shadowfen pack, having followed Cale, now emerged from the tree line, drawn by the clash of energies. They saw their alpha locked in battle with a monstrous blight wolf, and beside him, a small woman, singing, glowing with ethereal light, inspiring both packs. Seeing the blight's true nature and sensing the power emanating from Ilara, they understood. "Join her song!" Cale roared, his voice cutting through the din as he held the blight creature at bay. "Fight with light, not only tooth and claw." Inspired, a few of the Silverwood wolves, emboldened by Ilara's song and Cale's courage, began to howl, not in fear, but in defiance, joining the ancient melody. Then more. The Shadowfen wolves, recognizing the ancient song of cleansing, added their own powerful voices. The collective sound, a harmonious chorus of human and wolf, pulsed with pure, untainted energy. The blight creature screamed, a sound of agony and defeat. The silver light from Ilara, amplified by the pack's united song, surged, enveloping the monster. It thrashed, its form dissolving, until, with a final, piercing shriek, it imploded into nothingness, leaving behind only a faint, acrid smell and the echoing silence of its demise. Theron's husk, no longer animated, collapsed to the ground, disintegrating into dust, finally finding peace. Ilara collapsed too, the surge of power leaving her weak but exhilarated. Cale, shifting back into human form, rushed to her side, pulling her gently into his arms. The two packs, Silverwood and Shadowfen, stood together, the ancient animosity momentarily forgotten, united by the triumph over a common enemy and the awe-inspiring display of the Omega's power. Garth, the Beta, fell to his knees, shame and understanding finally dawning on his face. "We were blind," he whispered, his voice hoarse with regret. "We mocked her, and she saved us all." The forest began to heal. The blight, now vanquished, released its grip. New, vibrant green shoots emerged from the previously withered trees. The air, once heavy and stagnant, became crisp and clean, carrying the hopeful scent of damp earth and fresh pine. The moon's shadow sickness among the pups receded, their tiny howls once again full of life and joy. In the aftermath, the Silverwood pack was forever changed. The old hierarchy, based solely on brute strength and dominance, had crumbled with Theron and the Blight. What remained was a yearning for true leadership, for a guiding hand that understood not just power, but purpose, empathy, and unity. Elara, once the ridiculed Omega, was now seen for who she truly was. A visionary, a healer, a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. Her connection to the forest, her profound understanding of the pack's heart, her quiet strength that had endured years of scorn, these were the qualities they now desperately sought. There was no formal election, no grand declaration. It was an unspoken consensus, a shift in the pack's collective spirit. The elders, those who had once averted their gaze, now sought her counsel. The hunters, who had once scoffed at her foraging, now listened intently to her insights on the forest's subtle changes. The mothers, whose pups she had saved, offered her unwavering loyalty. Garth, humbled, was among the first to pledge his fealty, his eyes filled with genuine remorse and respect. KL stood by her side, not as a conqueror, but as an equal. He had offered to merge the two packs, to absorb the weakened Silverwood into the stronger Shadowfen. But Elara, with her newfound voice, had a different vision. "Our packs are distinct, Alpha KL," she said to him one evening, as they stood overlooking their shared, revitalized lands, the two-pack banners now flying side by side, no longer in opposition, but in harmony. "Their strengths are different, their histories unique, but our hearts are united. We will form an alliance, a bond of mutual respect and protection, not a merger. We will learn from each other, grow together, and defend each other as one larger family, a federation of wolf clans." KL looked at her, his silver eyes filled with admiration and love. The slow-burn romance, nurtured through shared danger and quiet understanding, had blossomed into a deep, unbreakable bond. He saw her not just as a leader, but as his soulmate, his equal in every sense. He knelt before her, a powerful alpha bowing to the quiet strength of his Luna. "Your wisdom surpasses mine, Elara. I pledge my pack and my heart to your vision, to our shared future." Elara gently lifted him, her fingers tracing the strong lines of his jaw. "Rise, my alpha. We lead together." Their mating ceremony was not one of grand spectacle, but of profound meaning. Under the same full moon that had once overseen her intended sacrifice, they exchanged vows of eternal loyalty, love, and partnership. Elara, now standing tall, adorned with ancient silver woven into her dark hair, her eyes shining with newfound purpose, was no longer the feeble Omega. She was Luna Elara, leader of the unified wolf clans, her voice a melody of hope and her presence a beacon of strength. She established new traditions, fostering empathy and valuing diverse skills. She created councils where every wolf, regardless of rank, had a voice, their insights respected. She ensured that the ancient knowledge of healing and forest lore, once almost lost, was taught to all. She became known as the Moon-Touched Luna, a leader who ruled not with an iron fist, but with a guiding heart, listening to the whispers of the land and the needs of her people. The combined wolf clans flourished under their joint leadership. The Shadowfen, with Kael's strength, provided protection and strategic acumen. The Silverwood, revitalized by Alara's wisdom and deep connection to the land, brought healing and a renewed sense of community. Their combined territories became a sanctuary, a testament to what could be achieved when differences were set aside for a greater good. Elara, once mocked as the feeble Omega, now stood as a revered leader, a symbol of transformation and enduring hope. Her journey had been one of pain and rejection, but it had forged her into someone truly extraordinary. She had found her voice, not by shouting, but by listening. She had found her power, not in dominance, but in empathy. And she had found love, not through grand gestures, but through shared understanding and unwavering respect. Her life was a living testament to the truth that every soul, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, carries a universe within. It was not the loudness of her song, but the truth of her melody that echoed through eternity, transforming not just herself, but the very world around her. She had risen, not to conquer, but to unite, proving that true leadership sprung not from the might of a wolf, but from the unwavering heart of an Omega. Please remember to like the story if it resonated with you, subscribe to Lyra's Romances for more tales of transformation and love, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What was your favorite moment in Ilara's journey?